Well, hi, good afternoon. My name is Kevin Ladd. I'm the Vice President of Global Infrastructure for Sterling Backcheck. We're a background check company. Back in 2014, my team was tasked with taking our developers in production, copying and pasting files methodology to a more DevOps and continuous integration strategy. We procured budget to build a team, to find a framework, and then start developing the right processes to implement the vision of getting people out of production. So we started when our budget freed up in 2015, and we started, I think, in week one with Mr. Stefan Looney and Mr. Jeremy Baus here, starting at the core of the network. We worked to decide on a framework. Stefan's worked with the Kinney Group and with BladeLogic and had experience with lots of different tool sets and ultimately decided on the SaltStack. Spent the next couple months defining exactly how that was going to work and starting to get the masters, the minions, the repos, and the methodologies built up for our organization. At the same time, we had an initiative to change out our current integration strategy with some of our customers to a SnapLogic-based approach so that we had one external point for our customer base, and then everything else was hidden behind the SnapLogic platform. We started from the very beginning with the SaltStack using the methodology we developed in the spring. And by summer, we had a full integration stack for dev, QA, and prod and a methodology to push it through, starting with some access in dev and then no access for anybody in QA and prod. It all went through SaltStack. So by running that way, we were able to achieve one of our visions in 2016. We had to move data centers. So we had to move our entire development site from Atlanta to Virginia. SnapLogic was one of the first ones we were able to do in short order because instead of having to do a migration, we tore it down and spun it back up using the salt states. And it was the easiest one out of all the applications we had to move. So today, Stefan and Jeremy are here to show you how we use Salt at Sterling, as well as talk to you a little bit about the SnapLogic integration.
There we go. Awesome. So thanks, Kevin. Kevin, can you hit the slide for me, please? So I'm Stefan. Like Kevin said, about a year and a half ago, I had an opportunity to build automation kind of from the ground up, do this whole kind of DevOps thing, platform, automate the infrastructure itself. We really just got to start with a clean slate, so it's really cool. So it's kind of interesting when I first started, pretty much on my first day, I had the pleasure to hire Jeremy Baus as our first automation engineer on the team. And then a little while later, we got Tyler in the back of the room there. Tyler joined our team as a junior automation engineer. We've got a couple other guys as well. Let's go ahead. So like Kevin said, some of our goals were, fast, repeatable, reliable deployments. A lot of our deployments were done manually. When things are done manually, they're riddled with errors, right? We wanted instant builds of new QA, dev, production environments. We want to be able to spin them up very quickly. And then one of our other big goals last year was to automate patching of Linux and Windows servers. So I'll go into the Wintel side of that a little bit later. Linux is a whole lot easier to do just because it's native, right? Kevin? So to get everything started for us, I'll give you a little bit of background on SaltStack. So I spent the better part of a decade at BladeLogic doing automation with a GUI-based tool set. When working with the Kinney Group, we had a unique challenge to pull BladeLogic out and replace it with something else. We needed something that was fast, something that was scalable, something that was cross-platform being the key component there. And so I had my first introduction to SaltStack, was able to very quickly deploy domain controllers with a Linux-based automation tool. So I was sold. Fast forward, I get hired at Sterling and find out we're a .NET shop. I'm a Linux guy. It's not a great mix. And so I said, well, we have to have a cross-platform tool. The nasty P word, we can't use that. The nasty A word, we can't use that. So we needed something to really put a good recipe together. So we started off with SaltStack. We also bought the Enterprise so we'd have support, so we'd get support from the great guys at Salt. We use a Git repository to store all of our Salt states. We use some artifact repositories for Wintel packages and any payloads that we deploy. And then for Windows patching, we need something to give us a hand, and so we use a WSUS server, right? So we need a way to pull those patches down from Microsoft and get them down locally and kind of approve and blacklist those patches, which there's some new features in Salt that just came out that'll make this a little bit easier. So for Windows patching, as it lives right now at Sterling, so you've got the big Microsoft out there in the cloud. We've got a series of WSS servers. We've got one in each one of our major data centers. Those WSS servers, we let them just pull down all the patches, and then we have groups set up to approve which patches are allowed to go to which boxes, right? So you don't always want to update .NET, it breaks things. You don't always want to update Internet Explorer, it breaks things. So, and then we've got, our minions. Our minions report up into the WSS servers. Our minions also report up into our Salt Master, obviously, right? So we let WSS pull the patches down, and when we do a patch analysis, we're doing a list updates, win list updates job, right? So we pull back and say, give me what the target thinks it needs to patch, right? Let me back up a little bit, because one of the problems with WSS, right, is it's, even if you set GPOs in Active Directory and you just let WSS go, you don't know what was actually applied to what. These boxes go out, they pull them down, they run it, maybe they reboot, maybe they don't. WSS is completely ignorant of what happens, very black box style. With Salt, when we call the list updates, we know what it needs to be applied, right? Then we run our update job. We know what was actually applied. We get our results back within Salt, right, in YAML format. We can parse that, we dump it in spreadsheets, things like that. And then if we need a reboot, we can do a get needs reboot against the target. Do they need to be rebooted? If they do, are we allowed to reboot in this maintenance window? We reboot. Last but not least, you run your list updates job again, right? Is there anything else I need to do, or did anything go sideways? And so the minions each individually are going to go out to their appropriate WSS servers. The traffic is between them, not so much between the Salt Master and the target. And then we only need the helper server from a WSS perspective. Does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions on that? Okay. So one of the cool things that Salt has come out with in the WUA rewrite of win_update, they give the ability to blacklist and whitelist now, so I can specify the actual UID of a particular patch and say, go get this one patch and install it on this box. So if you've got something that's critical, some, I don't know, pick a vulnerability, and you say, I want the patch for this, and I want to deploy it across my environment, right? You can take that particular patch and you can blow it out instead of, well, I got to go to my WSS box, I got to unallow everything else, just mark this one as okay, propagate, wait, make a pot of coffee, come back, and then execute, right? So now you can just say, this knowledge base article, I want the UID from it, fire it off, call it a day, right? So Kevin mentioned SnapLogic. So we had a vendor come in, they're a great group of guys, don't want to take anything away from them. SnapLogic, we had really a lot of success with them. One things that we had initially, we had was a couple dozen SnapLogic servers that we had to build. Yeah. And so we had a number of servers to build. First thing we noticed when we spun up our dev environment was no two builds look the same. That's a problem, right? So we said, let's drop back and let's give you one box. I want you to build on this box, document it, turn it over to us, and we're going to automate it. So they document it, and just like I am with my documentation, I miss stuff, right? My documentation's horrible. And so I get a bunch of missing components, we try it doesn't work. So Jeremy has a brilliant idea. Well, why don't we take opt SnapLogic, do a get init, make this thing its own little Git repo. Now we can track their changes. It's absolutely not what you're supposed to use Salt or Git for. You should never do that, ever, unless you have to, in which case we did. And it worked like a charm. So we were able to actually promote their actual install and configuration because fortunately it was self-contained. All we had to do was watch it. We could promote to QA, let them test. We see their boxes come up in their, what they call a cloudplex. They come up in the cloud. They work all fine and good, and we can promote that to production, right? So it made it super easy using a, kind of a DevOps style or a application deployment style deployment versus, what you might think of as a traditional Salt state, right? So it was kind of cool. We trimmed their install time down from, I don't know, hours, inconsistent hours. I think the fastest build we had was about 6 minutes. So it was considerably faster. And then they were our first big move to our new data center. When we moved from one to the other, it was like, what are we going to do? We'll just execute Salt, a couple Salt states. We'll call this a day. We spun them up. I don't know. I think it took longer to make coffee in the Keurig. Yeah. So it was pretty slick. So we were really impressed with it. The speed, the agility, it was pretty awesome. Try again. There we go. Okay. So I really wanted to kind of rush through the death by PowerPoint part of this because we're going to try something. We're going to try something with our demo, and hopefully this works out for us. So we use SaltStack Enterprise, like I said. We deploy .NET code, which is kind of, I think it's different than what a lot of people use Salt for. I think a lot of people use Salt to deploy, configuration management, right? I want this file to look like this on this box, right? They use it to deploy files, PHP files, HTML files, configs, whatever, from point A to point B. They use it to spin stuff up in AWS, right? I think everybody's probably spun up an instance in AWS or something with Salt, but we use it to deploy .NET code. So it's kind of fun, kind of different. We have some Linux boxes, so we deploy code to multiple environments there. We use it for change control. So you can't get to our production environment unless you use SaltStack. Doesn't matter if it's Windows or Linux. Doesn't really matter what it is. We have only a handful of exceptions to that rule. We deploy systems on-prem and in the cloud. And of course, like I said, we patch servers. And we do a lot more crazy stuff. So I talked to the guys from Salt, and they gave me permission to download a beta version of the GUI today, get it up and running, and actually try to do some use cases with it right here and now. So thanks to the guys at Salt for that. And with that, well, first, does anybody have any questions? I know I zipped through, but does anybody have any questions about how we use Salt or what we're doing with it? Specifically around, probably Windows patching is the biggest question we ever get. Right, and how that works. Anybody? Okay. Okay, good deal. If you want to.
Yeah, I got one. So what was your biggest challenge with the Windows side of things?
I think really the biggest challenge with the Windows side of the shop has been really kind of Windows reliability. Right, Windows really is a great product when it's configured well. It performs well. The downside to that is Windows boxes get spun up and they're snowflaked, right? So everybody's building them a little differently. And I think the biggest challenge really is trying to take a GUI-based environment and make it consistent from a command line, right? And I think that honestly and truthfully is the biggest challenge with Windows, just period. Any other questions? No? Okay. If you want to swap over. So just yesterday we got well, let me back up. So we're flying into town and we're all sitting, we're having dinner. We, like any responsible employee, we all took the exact same flight. So we had our entire Linux team, basically our whole automation team, and our senior leadership, Kevin there, all on the same flight. Was not well played. And just really minutes before we're boarding, we get what we refer to as a Sev1. Anybody ever been on a Sev1 call? Right? So we get this kind of mission critical issue. And we're like, Kevin's first response is, you've got to fix this right now. This has to be done. We're getting ready to board a plane. And so Jeremy and I, we just kind of laugh. We're like, it's no big deal. We got this. We've got Wi-Fi on the plane, right? And so we all get on the plane. while we're waiting for everybody to board the plane, Jeremy and I are banging out salt states for some one-off fixes, right? And it was super cool because as soon as we hit 10,000 feet, right? 10,000 feet and change, we ran our first test on our dev environment. And we said, yay, this works. As soon as we hit 33,000 feet and about 600 miles an hour, we are going to do our fastest deployment ever. And so we did an incredible 600 mile an hour deployment from 33,000 feet. And thanks to Salt, we had the ability to test it within our Vagrant environment locally. We were able to test it in our development environment after we promoted the pull request for our, or approved our pull request. And then we were able to just promote it straight out to prod, let a couple of our guys locally in Atlanta do a test on it, and then boom, there it goes. So it's really super cool, and it's a testament to just how fast and flexible you can be as a person when using a great automation tool. So anyway, so with that, we also got somebody changed something on a production box. Anybody ever have that happen? Right. You get a lot of head nods, right? So somebody changed something on a production box. We find out, hey, somebody changed a config file and somebody changed the password here and there, right? And so we knocked out a real quick, password reset. Pretty slick, pretty cool. And then we decided, you know what? Let's actually make kind of a self-service portal out of that for the NOC as just a private little POC. And we took us about 30 minutes to get the UI completely set up, configured, and running on his laptop in VirtualBox. Took us another 10 minutes to kind of figure out how the thing worked because we hadn't really seen it and played with it yet. We saw the slides. And then another 2 minutes later, we baselined our dev environment's root passwords in Linux. So it's pretty cool. And so I'm going to have Jeremy actually show you that. So who here has seen the UI so far? Everybody? So just out of general curiosity, has anybody here thought about using it like just for a self-service portal for non-administrators? Anybody else? So kind of our vision and Salt's vision for it might be a little bit different than ours, but I personally don't need a GUI. I'm very comfortable with the command line. He's not comfortable with a GUI at all. A lot of us don't ever use a mouse, right? Everything's keyboard, right? But we've got a lot of people in our environment at our NOC and places like that. We're primarily a Windows shop. And so it makes it tricky when we say, hey, all you got to do is log into Salt, and you do that by opening up PuTTY. Wait, what's PuTTY? It's not a kid's toy. It's actually a tool. Oh, okay, well, show me how to use that. Okay, so now you've shelled to the box. Now, the first thing we're going to need you to do is we're going to need you to learn how to use sudo. What's that? Never mind. We've got a UI now. And so we have the ability to build this stuff on the back end, right, and do the hard work for our end users. And then, let the NOC or even management, right? I mean, if somebody in management wants to log in and say, hey, can you show them the dashboard real quick?
Are you not seeing it? Are you not seeing it?
No. I mean the dashboard that has the pretty little pie charts.
Oh, the summary. Okay.
Yeah, so you can kind of see like there's data here, and that's kind of cool for people like Kevin or whatever that want to see, what you have, right, at a glance, right? We've got reporting tools and stuff that'll show some of this, but it's really cool for us to be able to have people react off of some of this information. So if you want to show the password reset.
Yeah, so I've gone ahead on a couple of our boxes here, I just randomly threw in some passwords for the root account. So I can't log into it as root because I don't even know what the password is right now. So I'll go ahead and...
Security best practice. If even we can't get in, we're pretty sure the hackers can't either.
So I can go ahead now and I can go ahead and schedule this job here to run. And it's going to go ahead and run. And
now keep in mind, Jeremy and I are subject matter experts with this UI. We've been using it for almost exactly 3 hours.
And we're just waiting for a notification that it completed. As we found out, there is still a known bug that it will say it's pending even though it is
Well,
accepted.
we need a refresh, right? We just need a refresh. And bear in mind, the guys at Salt were very, very nice and let us do a pre-beta. Yes, sir.
Do you know how the view on this from yet?
Honestly, I haven't tried yet. And
For what?
to see this like on an iPhone.
Yeah, I haven't even attempted
So
to look
we
at
actually
it.
we're fortunate. We have one of the UI developers here.
It is squished.
Squished. Is that the technical term for that? So I think that's a Java function. Squished.
Yeah. So this is actually, I've been fighting with here. As you can see here, this box here had its password go ahead and be reset. It actually ran against all 4 servers that are actually live and active, but only the one password was changed up. So it's reset it back to the default password that we expect that server to be set at and what's stored in our password vault.
I'll tee you up a little bit. So what was the cause for this particular use case? Like the originating idea and issue. I mean, you talk about people getting on the boxes messing around, but does this have anything to do with your environment and some of the people that you work with?
So that guy's been fired already.
Well, so I guess to kind of back up a little bit. So, I said I came to Sterling just a little over, I guess, right at a year and a half ago now. And when you walk into a fresh environment, especially one that's been hand jammed, right? So everything's snowflaked. People have SSH keys stored here and there. People are using, everybody has the root password because it's, consistent and 3 characters long, that kind of stuff, right? I mean, everybody deals with that when you first come into an environment. And so, yeah, so early on, a lot of this came from, what we really need is consistency across the environment. We really need, developers that should only be working in dev shouldn't have access to QA. Let your QA people, log into QA. Let your dev people log into development. Let your production support staff log into support, right? And so that was really kind of the first thing. And then there's a whole other side to this. Has anybody ever lost a password to a server? Okay, just a couple. You guys are awesome. Everybody else in here has never lost one. It sucks when you do because you can't get in your box. You got to root it, right? And Windows, that gets really tricky. And so kind of the cool thing about Salt is as long as you remember the password to your Salt master and you have a running minion on the target, you can always reset that password. So you get locked out, you get kind of stuck back in a corner, you have a way to reset your environment. And as a random side note, something I thought about, can you scroll through this even though it's squished on a mobile device?
That's a good question. I think it's more tablet. I haven't tried it on a phone in recent months. So
Random thought.
We've got other plans for mobile. We don't have plans to make this view mobile friendly.
Okay.
And in all fairness, this has been pretty good, getting this up in 3 hours, and having the remote master is connecting to my laptop over a VPN and then going through a NAT to get to the UI.
Yeah, so yeah, to add a little flavor to this, we were going to do some Windows patching with this and actually demo that. The problem is we've got remote servers that are sitting, a long way away, and this thing's connecting to it over a MiFi that's in his shirt pocket, and so we did end up with some constraints. Salt can fix a lot of things. It can help lower your blood pressure. It can improve your quality of life, but it cannot improve your bandwidth, unfortunately. So, and then from a command line perspective, I think you were going to do something with the actual SnapLogic stuff.
Yeah, let me go ahead and get this one, and we'll start with showing. This is just a quick look at the dashboard here, and it just, right now you can see here, it just says that it's got 2 nodes. There's actually 4 nodes that are there. We've purposely shut down a couple of the nodes. And
So one of the cool things, so these are one of the kind of fresh environments that, like Kevin said, we had this opportunity to really just start from scratch with this vendor, and they were good sports about it, and they continue to be a good sport about it. So we use high states for these things, right? You can't always use a high state because you break stuff. This tool is actually, the SnapLogic tool set is very well built, and so it gives us the opportunity to just execute a high state, and we can execute it over and over and over and over, and it will never impact anything as long as everything is okay. The second something's not okay, we don't have to troubleshoot it. It's kind of like using a container. You just nuke it, new container. So with these, we do the same thing. We just run a high state, everything gets back to normal, we see them come back up in the cloud. It's great. And then hopefully with any kind of luck, this will
Pass successfully.
pass successfully. And there we go. Lots of green. Love to see that.
And there's the changes. Restarting the snap.
Bringing them back online.
And it'll take it a few minutes, but this will actually then get refreshed, and we'll see that the node count will actually go to active to 4 from 2. After a while, it just takes it a while for it to get its heartbeat. If anybody's worked with Java, they know that sometimes it takes it a while for that app to start up.
Not Java.
Another related question while we're waiting. For your Windows servers, where did you find sort of the breakdown in workload being able to call native Salt modules versus calling out the PowerShell for various operations?
Okay, so to kind of re-ask the question, right? So you're asking, so where do we stop using native Windows module calls in SaltStack and pick up with PowerShell or something to that effect, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right. All through Salt, but yeah, modules versus.
So everything we do is through SaltStack. There are a few items that we do have to do in PowerShell. So we've got some interaction that we have to do for some stuff. Kevin is really good with PowerShell scripting, and so we have had to do a few things in Active Directory with PowerShell. And honestly, I can't think of another.
We've got the job that runs every night and does the AD dump.
That's AD.
Yeah,
that's all AD.
But
That's
it's all
Active Directory.
PowerShell ran from a scheduler from SaltStack.
Yeah, we're using an orchestration to fire that off. But other than that, honestly and truthfully, if we're not interacting with Active Directory, it's with native calls within SaltStack directly.
And some of the stuff that I've started working with is more with like standing up the IIS servers and actually configuring the websites and the application pools and all that. I'm actually making, I've got some PowerShell script that is being called, but it's actually been pushed in behind an IIS execution module that I've been developing.
So for example, to install IIS, right, you can do a feature.install, right, and install IIS that way. Any of the components within Windows, it's just a feature.install. It's really fast, slick. You get your reporting back. One of the kind of things that until the Enterprise UI came out, you can see our node count, by the way, it came back up to 4. Until the Enterprise UI came out, reporting within Salt just really didn't exist, right? You could dump it to a database and write custom queries, but what we did was we actually just tied it to Splunk. And so we have, when we fire stuff off, if you're using native Salt modules, the reporting that you get back is much better. When you use PowerShell, there are some caveats where PowerShell will return back, it'll return back a non-exit 0 code, right? So it's going to show that it failed within Salt. But when you look at it, it actually didn't fail. It actually did exactly what you wanted it to do because it doesn't really have a, output my junk to dev null, right? Unfortunately, so you lose a lot when you use PowerShell. So we really try to avoid it. And then within Splunk, we just parse through the data and see what we need to see. Yeah, hopefully that answered your question. I don't know if I danced around it a bit or not, but yeah. Something else I was going to say around the, the .NET stuff. A lot of the, I'm on time. Am I good?
I think we got about 15.
Oh, wow, I got plenty of time to talk. Okay. So around kind of the .NET deployments, the reportability that we get back when we just dump our syslogs out of, we have everything kind of dump into syslog, we have our syslogs dump into Splunk, parse through that stuff, so we can actually see that, IS was installed, we've got IS installed on X number of boxes, right? We can do we can run nightly jobs to have Salt query the environment and say, okay, well, how many web servers do I have out there, right? And then that data gets, compiled back up into Splunk for some reporting and things like that. So it's just some different things we just, kind of, as the enterprise UI comes out, it's really going to be a huge benefit because we can just see it in that one tool. So, any other questions?
So, talking about the Snowflake OS, are you guys using traditional infrastructure, bare metal, to deploy in Windows? Do you guys have like a base image developed and utilize Salt for that? Or to what extent are you guys using Salt in your infrastructure?
So to re-ask your question, right, is to what extent are we actually using Salt in our infrastructure, right? So outside of just deploying code, what kind of provisioning are we doing? Are we doing bare metal provisioning? The answer to that would be no. We aren't doing any bare metal provisioning at this time. Most of our stuff is virtual. We've done Windows deployments virtually. We've done, or through Salt. We've actually provisioned from a clone template, and we do them in the cloud as well, in Azure and other providers. So we do some of it. Most of our environment already exists. So we had a ton of servers from the get-go, and so the challenge has been to take Snowflake servers that we may or may not know what's on them, try to make them look as much alike as we can without breaking them, and then as net new comes on, it all goes through Salt. Did that answer the question? Any other questions?
What is your strategy for getting the Salt minion onto the VM when it comes up?
So we use Salt SSH for our Linux boxes because that's super easy. And then for our initial push, because we had, I don't know, how many servers did we have when we started? A couple thousand. So we had I wouldn't call it a large environment, but it's sizable. So we have way more Windows servers than I want to go out and hand jam. And so we actually just did it with PowerShell for the most part, for the ones we knew the passwords for. Yeah, so that's. Oh, you're talking about templating?
Yeah, actually, that was
Oh.
the question, but that was an interesting historical.
Sorry, I misread that. So from a templating perspective, we actually just don't bake it in. We actually just push it out. Yeah, so anything that's built with Salt Cloud is much.
Yeah, we ran into a few cases where servers were being cloned, and when it was being cloned, the minion ID and the PKI was not being removed as part of a prep when they cloned it. So then we had servers that were all using the same key and the same minion ID.
Yeah, so you kind of it's easier for that template to just not have it, right? So we just clone it within SaltStack. You can just build it, call it a day. It's much easier that way.
Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
How do you mean?
Well, so when you got the clone and when you go to deploy it, what are you doing from SaltStack specifically to push out the menu?
So there are, was it WinExe, I think, that you can run on the Linux box that will allow you to provision the minion onto an existing Windows box.
Oh, okay.
So when you clone it and it comes online, you just have to wait a second, right? So when you're running Salt Cloud and you're deploying to VMware, for example, you just pause. So when it comes online, you just give it enough time to come online and actually be available. Once it is available, then you can use WinRM and tools like that to just deploy it. So for one of our Salt masters in the dev environment, we use WinRM.
Yeah.
Need the UI to fix things.
No, I have this problem with my Mac occasionally where it won't authenticate. And
The good news
I gotta
is we have
disconnect from
Salt,
the network.
and we can reset that password when he doesn't get it. Again, fortunately, he's really good with Salt. Any other questions? So have you ever used tools like WinRM? So do you have a Windows shop?
Yeah, it's primarily Windows. Well, 50% but I don't administer that side.
So it's really kind of interesting when you use a Linux-based tool to manage your Windows shop. Sometimes there are some caveats, like I said, right? So sometimes you'll have to call out the PowerShell or whatever. But if the docs now are actually incredible, the Salt docs. And if you just go to docs.saltstack.com and search for WinRM, there's a whole tutorial on exactly how to do it.
Okay. So now, how did you call the PowerShell after the SaltStack portion of it? Because, like you said, you were fine-tuning the IIS install. So, like, you were setting the bindings and all of that.
Command.run.
Yeah, you can use command.run and you just pass it along and tell it to use PowerShell as the shell to execute. And typically, when you're running command.run on your Linux or Unix, whatever NIX machine, your shell is defaulted to whatever your shell environment variable is set to.
In Windows, it's going to default
In
to the
Windows,
command
it
prompt.
still defaults to bin bash or bin shell, but you can actually pass that as a parameter to your command.run as an argument and say, tell it to run as shell or PowerShell as your shell, and pass along the script. You can also do the same thing with command.script and just actually have your PowerShell script as a Salt URL through the Salt file system, and it will copy it over to a temporary directory and execute it, and then remove that temporary file.
So you have it local on the Linux box, or there's some UNC path?
You can do it either way.
Either way. Typically, in most cases, we're actually doing it, it's on the Salt master, and it'll have a salt : / schema URL to reach back to the master to pull that file down and actually execute it.
Yeah, if for whatever reason, you've got to sit on a web server or something like that, you can do an HTTP call from within Salt and pull it down that way as well. I mean, there's 1,000 ways to do anything, right? What we found really is the best for us is, when you're dealing with PowerShell scripts, we want a known quantity. The Active Directory example that he gave, where we're doing some trickery there, we use file.managed. We keep it on the Salt master, and every time we execute it, because it's just a couple of K, for file size, we just literally just push it out, execute it, and then we just nuke it.
And I think the file.manage on that one is more of a holdover from when we were using an older version of Salt that had problems running the PowerShell scripts as a Salt source.
Yeah, and it's constantly evolving, right? So as things change and become better fleshed out, anything that we have PowerShell scripts for, we actually will just rip them out and use native Salt when we can. It just makes life a lot easier. Yeah, but if you've got a big environment, you want to start deploying and doing stuff like that, and you want to use something that's similar to Salt SSH, you can use WinRM, right? And then once you've got, the minions are actually managed within Salt, life becomes so much better. You get more time at home, less time at the shop. Yeah. Anyway. Any other questions? No?
I think we're good on time.
Yeah. I think we're actually right on it, right? Awesome. Thanks, guys. Appreciate your all's time.